closed captioning provided by Beaufort County.
Negotiating committee meeting to order. It is Thursday, January 6th. Who's doing roll call? Bree? Or
I will do that.
here?
Fred Hamilton.
Here.
Alice Howard.
Here.
Earl Davis.
Here.
Amanda Denmark.
Here.
Ashley Feaster.
Here.
Carol Twinkle.
Here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And all are here that are on the committee.
Everyone's here.
Perfect. Next is the adoption of the agenda. Mr. Steese, is there anything extra, a deleted addition that needs to go on? No, ma'am. Okay.
Good.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as y'all see it?
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We actually had a meeting in 19 on a different applicant, and Carol and Amanda, y'all weren't here, so y'all don't need to vote on this. But there are minutes from that meeting. Very thorough minutes, Bree. Thank you for that. And please note, because I started doing edits, there was an attorney whose last name was Fraser, and we have a councilman whose last name is Frazier. So it's not a typo. So Fraser was Simon, and then you called Fred or Frazier. So if there are no changes on that from your memory, is there a motion to accept these minutes?
I'll make a motion to accept
Thank
the
you,
minutes.
Alice. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Those that were present at that meeting can vote. All in favor, say by saying aye. Aye. You need to know who didn't vote. Who was not here? Amanda, Carol, Burl, were you sitting here?
Yeah.
Larry. Okay,
Larry
Amanda,
was.
Carol, and Burl abstained. Okay, presentations, probably what you are all here for. We thought it was very good with so many new residents that have moved here, and also for this committee to get an overview of what the negotiating committee actually does and how it serves the town. And then we'll go into the presentation of what the development agreement and future amendments on this particular one, so we can all get a handle on it. We will go down to new business. There will be a time for public comment, but this is more of a presentation time. So Kevin, good morning.
Real quick.
Good morning.
Yes,
Is there a way that we can
Speaking.
see things on
It
the
should
screen?
pop up. Are the screens going to pop up?
We can't see anything.
The screens aren't on.
I'll go, we'll get on that this second.
Thank you.
Yes, it should have been on. You can't, or you can.
See anything.
Interim.
Are you
Thank
good
you. I
on
can see
this?
that. Yes.
We'll get started with that. How about that?
Okay.
All right.
And
Well,
I'll let you know.
good morning, committee members. As Mayor SULKA stated, I'm going to give an overview of the negotiating committee. So we'll go ahead and get started. So it was initially established as a development agreement negotiating committee back in 2008. It was reestablished as a negotiating committee for town council by a resolution in 2010. And then the last committee meeting at that point was 2011. The committee membership was revised by town council 2019. As we've already gone through, here's everyone that is on the committee. So the purpose of the committee is to negotiate a platform for the town, applicants, property owners, representatives to rationally discuss and define proposals, terms, commitments as they relate to town standards, goals for the public, forum outside in a more formal meetings or outside of the more formal meetings of Planning Commission and Town Council. As you stated, this body will make a recommendation. So it is not the final action. So that's also for the individuals that are in the audience. So all applications need not be referred to the negotiating committee. However, those of the Town Council or the mayor find significantly complex in size or impact, they may be. So procedurally, Town Council will refer applications to the negotiating committee for a recommendation that then goes to Planning Commission and ultimately to Town Council. So the committee is tasked with arriving at a consensus and providing valid representation of the applicant's commitments to the project. Town staff will then provide those findings as the result of the committee to the Planning Commission for review and recommendations ultimately to Town Council. We talked about process. So the process that we go through is that Town Council will refer requests to negotiating committee. Applications are submitted. We hold the meeting From there, we can have a planning commission workshop if necessary, planning commission public hearing recommendation, and then first, second readings, with also town council holding that second reading as a public hearing. For this morning, the conduct of the meeting, as we stated, and it's as shown on the agenda, is that we present the matter to be heard, the presentation of staff, presentation by the applicant, which the applicant is here, any staff remarks, the committee, if you have any comments, questions, kind of a back and forth dialogue. At that opportunity, the public would have a chance to speak. From there, any final remarks from staff and the applicant. If necessary, you do have the ability to go into executive session if you have any concerns, issues from a legal standpoint, and then can get guidance from the town attorney. From there, we have a motion, second a motion, discussion, and then vote by the committee. I'm just going to go through this quickly, but one of the past negotiating committee items that we had was for Village of Verdeer, where they came in for an amendment. It was negotiated where there was a reduction in dwelling units, increase in non-residential square footage, and then some civic issues. As you can see on here, there was a negotiation for a payment of $184,000 in fees in arrears via the reprogramming of funds escrowed by the town. There was reprogrammed the remaining 8 years of the fee in lieu taxes. There was a donation of right-of-way along 170, that they would provide future access to the Okatee Regional Park, that there was reprogramming of acreage in that parcel D by removing 23 dwelling units, donation of 83 units from their original development rights to the Town of Bluffton Development Rights Bank, which I'll go through in a few minutes. And then they'd contribute $50,000 towards their pro rata share for a future signal at that location. Also, that they would donate, upon the time needed, not to exceed 1.5 acres of land for the construction of a multi-story civic building, that they allocated 5% of their total 404 dwelling units as workforce affordable housing, and that the future development would adhere to the current Town of Bluffton Unified Development Ordinance. I just provided a couple of maps here for you, just as a reference point. This is our growth framework map that we use anytime we're looking at development for concentrations, mainly of commercial development. And as you can see on this map, we do have, at the bottom of it, that is the big house tract Anson Marina right there, which is part of that village type. Zoning map, the areas that are in the light green are planned unit developments. Of the 9, I believe, that we have, 5 of them do have, of the 9 planned unit developments, 5 of them have development agreements. Here are the development agreements associated, 7. Now the numbers here are from December 31st of 2020. We do have updated numbers that will be presented to Town Council at their January meeting, and we will then update this map accordingly. This gives you an idea as to all of the planned unit developments and their current build out, again, as of December 2020. The Development Rights Bank, so that was established as part of the transfer of development rights back in 2007. It provides a way for the town to hold development rights or third-party owned development rights if necessary. Town-owned development rights held in the bank do not have a specific monetary value. Any type of development rights, if they are moving between a private owner to a private owner, we do acknowledge that, but we don't approve that. And that is a private matter. We have absolutely no idea how much someone would pay for those units. But in here, the ones that we have no monetary value. And then again, each request to acquire the development rights is on a case-by-case basis, which obviously would come in front of you as the negotiating committee. Current holdings, as you can see, for Buckwalter, Schultz, and then outside of the development agreements, we have a total of 1,084, as well as commercial square footage and acreage available.
Just so everyone's clear, those are things that have been taken off the books that were in previous development agreements that we've removed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right, at this point, are there any questions specifically for that? I just wanted to kind of give you just a quick overview of your roles and responsibility.
Any questions of the committee on any of this? Great, okay.
All right, and next we're going to go to the, under presentations, number 2, which is the Palmetto Bluff Development Agreement Concept Plan Amendments Overview.
While you're pulling that up, Kevin, this also has been posted on our agenda site. Everyone in the room and watching can go to townofbluffton.sc.gov and go to the Agenda Center, and they can see exactly what we are seeing. You also can search development agreements, and it'll take you to a page that has all of our development agreements in links of amendments, and everyone can go back and look at that and pull it up. If there are amendments, I would urge you to look at the amendments because they address the original agreement and are also by law, legal by law. So, okay.
Bear with me 1 second as we pulled up this presentation. I didn't have it pulled up automatically. Okay, so next we're going to kind of give an overview of Palmetto Bluff itself, the original development agreement, as well as the various amendments to the development agreement and concept plan. So originally, Palmetto Bluff was annexed into the town in 1998, which consisted of the 21,749 acres by various ordinances that are listed here on the page. I'm happy to go through them if you want to. But as part of the applicant's planning process, and then for the next phase is what we're here for this afternoon, which for the development of Palmetto Bluff, says including the expansion of the Big House water access point, which we commonly known as Anson Marina. And they've requested the amendments from the development agreement and concept plan to allow for that dry stack storage and dockside fueling. Here is a copy of the original concept plan, which did show all of the water access points, somewhat difficult to read, but then towards the bottom, you can barely see the down at the very bottom here is where the Big House is located. So the first development agreement amendment was in 2004. And that was the New Riverside PUD was created by taking a portion of Palmetto Bluff and a portion of Jones Estate, cutting off those pieces and then merging them together to create New Riverside Village. The New Riverside PUD. So when those two original PUDs were in place to create that New Riverside Village, you can see that we had various total acreage for both Jones Estate and Palmetto Bluff. There was transfers for both of them to create that new Riverside PUD. There was an extinguishment of 80 dwelling units from Palmetto Bluff. There was a conversion of 40 acres of commercial to 160 dwelling units. And then from there, the new created PUD of New Riverside had the 4,000 total acres, 4,700 RDUs, 190 acres of commercial, and 200 acres of business park. And then from there, you have then the revised Jones Estate PUD, and then the revised Palmetto Bluff. This is a representation of the New Riverside PUD. There's a blue line that kind of runs right through here. That was the dividing line. To the right was Palmetto Bluff. To the left was Jones Estate.
So just stay on that, just for everyone. That main road, maybe show some markers. That's New,
yeah, sorry, hold on one
New
second.
Riverside
Okay, sure.
Parkway, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, so to the north, that would be 46. The squiggly line that kind of runs through the whole thing, that is New Riverside Drive.
Parkway, okay.
And then on the right side here, it's blanked out area. That's Old Palmetto Bluff Road. And then the entrance to Palmetto Bluff is approximately right here. In 2005, there was a second amendment to the development agreement, and I'm not going to read it all verbatim, but it came to be where there was a restriction on the New River access. It included an expansion to the big house, and what it did was it created a restriction that a number of slips not to exceed 10% of total cumulative number of approved development units in Palmetto Bluff could go towards wet slips for the marina. With that, in the first phase, any construction, they're allowed to do the first phase of up to the 50 wet slips, as well as areas utilized by the transient kayaks and other vessels. And then as they expanded on that total number, which again, currently, Palmetto Bluff is at 4,000 allowed dwelling units, 10%, which is 400. So total of 400. In their, they have an approved DHEC marina permit right now. So they could go out and construct the marina right now in that first phase of 50 slips. And then what it says is that as they expand, they have to expand with the community. So, and it's just for the needs of the community.
Can we ask a question?
Yes, yes.
So I noticed in the package there was a letter dated from DHEC dated July 23rd, 2014 that said it expires October 10th, 2021.
They have since received an extension for that approval.
And what's the extension to?
I believe it is until the end of this year.
Yeah, it was further down in the packet at
Okay,
the very
I missed
end. It was June of 2022, and then it was extended to December of 2022.
Okay, thank you.
And then there was another date I was going to bring up that I guess the completion date has to be a certain date too. I thought I saw that in the packet, but we can discuss it when we get to that.
A couple of the other items that don't necessarily pertain to this morning's request, but there was a donation of 42 acres for a park. They established the $900 municipal improvement development fee for all the residential dwelling units associated with New Riverside, except for Heritage at New Riverside. And it was set to expire 7 years from the date of that second agreement. In 2009, there was a third amendment to the development agreement, which corrected the acreage from the 42 acres to the 43.84. And then you can also see they removed the obligation for the town design and construct the park within 3 years of acquiring the land, removed the obligation of Palmetto Bluff to donate the $50,000 for design and $100,000 for construction, since the donation of acreage was larger than previously required or previously set, and that kind of offset the cost there. With that, also, the fourth one was that the town conditionally waived the default of Palmetto Bluff at that time as they were coming out of Chapter 11. Then we had an amendment to the second development agreement amendment. So an amendment to the second amendment. And that was in 2012, and that extended the expiration date of that municipal improvement development fee. And so that way, the payment of uncollected fees, its expiration date was then set for 15 years.
15 years from when is that expiration? Do you have that, or can you get it for us?
Is that from the 2012?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So 2027 is the
Yes, ma'am.
expiration of that.
Okay. Then we had the fourth development agreement amendment and the first concept plan amendment, and that was in 2012. And that was the donation of 6 acres to the town within the New Riverside development. And that's for our stormwater pilot project that's located off of Old Palmetto Bluff Road. There was a deposit of RDUs to the town's development rights bank for future transfer. The transfer of the 1,080 residential dwelling units to Palmetto Bluff would then be an administrative action that wasn't required to go back in front of Planning Commission or Town Council. This is just a copy of that, that we call it the cloud of the development rights, and just how they transferred from one location into the cloud and then transferred to other locations. So we have that, that New Riverside PUD. We had the transfer of units back and forth. I'd say Bree did a great job of clarifying this to make sure we truly understood, you know, kind of where we stand. So when you look at it for Palmetto Bluff, that total acreage of the 19,217, 4,000 dwelling units. And what we did in red is just to show you kind of a snapshot as of today. So as of today, 1,607 RDUs have been utilized. Now, when we say utilized, that doesn't necessarily mean that all have been constructed. That means that lots have been created through a subdivision. 5 acres of commercial have been utilized, and then they still have the 175. And then you can also see for New Riverside PUD. And then 2016, there was an addendum to that New Riverside concept plan, which transferred the 1,080 units that were deposited in the bank back into Palmetto Bluff. And that was picked up on the concept plan. Again, you can't read the text that's on there. It's the horizontal lines in the area to the left, but it is picked up in the text of that transfer. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the various amendments that have gone through Palmetto Bluff.
Can I check and see if there are any questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Committee, do you have questions on this? Any further information you may want on this? Please feel free to ask even post-meeting.
Okay, I got a question, Kevin.
Mr.
Yes, sir.
Davis.
The 10% of the RDUs and the number of slips you said would be 400, is that located at one location?
Yes, sir. That is specifically at
the Big House
Big
location?
House, Anson Marina.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes, sir.
Questions? I have a question really for when we get to the point we're discussing this, because you've said in a lot of what you're about to go over that it is a 10% and of the units. But at the time on Amendment 2, there were far less units on the books. So was that an error kind of back then that they probably should have said of the current RDUs? I mean, I guess I'm just asking, and none of us really were here doing that, because it seems like the 10% equates to whatever the RDUs are at any time. But to me, it would make sense it should have been at the time of that amendment. But
I'm gonna look to Terry for this one.
I
yes.
kind of was looking at him
I'd have to
too.
go back and, I'd have to go back and historically look at that.
Yeah, I think that'd be good for us to know, and as I hope people are seeing, these committee meetings are a lot of give and take, and it's seeing, you know, what the real world circumstances are today and what it was like in 1999, and we all know a lot has changed, but it might be something worth us knowing, and if not, we need to clarify that as well. Okay.
Kevin, can you go back to that slide that she's talking about?
Try
Second
to,
amendment.
try to speak in here too, and I'm doing bad at it well. So Amanda would like you to go back to that amendment too. Yeah, right there.
Yep.
So at a slide previous to that, if you go to slide number 5, you'll see when all that took place, there was actually a moment in time that Palmetto Bluff's units were 2920.
Right.
So that's what I had read on the packet. Okay. And if anyone from the back cannot hear us, please kind of do this, because it is hard to kind of remember to lean down into the microphone. Just let us know if you can't hear. Joe, I'm going to count on you. Thank you.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
You mentioned the DHEC approval for the big house is established till December 2022. Does that include the 50 slips or 400 slips?
That includes up to 177, I believe it's 177 slips. Anything beyond that, they then have to either amend or get a new DHEC
Okay.
approval for construction of additional slips. The development agreement allows for up to the 400 units. They still have to go from a regulatory standpoint. They
Right.
still have to go through Army Corps,
Right.
DHEC.
That's what my next question was, is Army Corps approve those as well?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I know,
For 170?
yeah. So for
In
the 170, it's already been approved. And then up to the 400, they would have to either amend the existing permit or then they have to get a new permit. Either way, they have to get it approved by those two groups.
It trumps whatever our development agreement says.
Okay.
If they say no, they can't fall, no one can fall back to what a town agreement did. And it was deep into this development agreement. And if you ever had a sleepless night, you could have gotten there. It's in phases. So it's like 50 odd numbers all the way up to 170 something.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And there should have been a copy in one of the links provided of that permit, and it shows kind of the design of those slips.
Any other questions on this? Would you like him to pull that up?
It's okay. I just.
Okay, okay,
Okay.
good.
Okay.
So let's just kind of plan for the day. It's moving along and the questions are all very good. The new business, we're going to probably, and out of respect for so many people who came that wanted to provide public comment, we're going to at least get to F and maybe G to see where it goes, because we all know we have other things in our worlds that we're not going to stay here until 3 or 4. So it most likely, most definitely will be a follow-up. But that's kind of where I'm thinking we'll get to, because I do want public comment to be made today. Okay, you're all yours, Kevin.
Okay. So the request that we have in front of you right now is for that now 5th amendment to the development agreement, and then the 2nd amendment to the concept plan. So there are two items that we have. And then when this goes in front of town council, there's actually 2 agenda items, and they make 2 different votes, because you have to vote on the development agreement and then also on the concept plan. So, and I'll show you here in just a second that the request is for that 2nd dry stack storage, and then the, as we call it, dockside fueling. So again, 5th amendment to the development agreement, 2nd amendment to the concept plan. Some quick background, March of last year now, Palmetto Bluff did submit an application proposing amendments to the development agreement, concept plan, and then restating on their declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Palmetto Bluff docks. In August of last year, the Planning Commission held a workshop. There were numerous questions that came up regarding the application. And I'm going to go through those questions here in a minute, so that way you can kind of understand the mindset that they had. The applicant then made corrections to their application, where they reduced down a lot of the language that was being proposed, and then they condensed it down to, again, that allow for dry stack storage and dockside fueling. So here's a copy of the currently approved concept master plan. Again, everyone's had an opportunity to look at that, where it does call out for that water access at Big House. So dry stack storage, just to make sure everybody understands what we mean by dry stack storage. This is Wilson's Landing. This is if you're on the river looking towards dry stack storage, this is the side that you would see. If you are on the lake side, or the west side, this is the side that you would see. And then from an aerial standpoint, you can see where the dock is located, where the forklifts take the boats from dry stack and then take them out to the water, and they're placed and then picked back up right there. You see the slips that are out there. Those are more transient slips for, as multiple people request their boat, they'll take the boats out into the water, move them over into one of the slips, and then the individual come, get in their boat, have fun, go back, and then drop it off. So this is the section of the development agreement where it refers to the 3 water access points. And then it talks about 2 of these accesses must be sited at the existing accesses known as Lodge and Big House. Dry stack facilities shall be located at only 1, that's the existing language in red, of these accesses. So the applicant is requesting, instead of 1, 2 accesses. And then fueling facilities shall be allowed at the accesses, but with the exception of Big House access point, there shall be no dispensing of fuel either at docks or within buffers or setbacks. So currently at Wilson Village, they have fuel that's there. It's on the uplands. What they can't do is they can't bring those fuel lines down to the dock, down towards the water. So that's what they're requesting at Big House, not at Wilson Landing, only at Big House. And then similar language for the concept plan as well, where the allowing for the dry stack storage and then the fueling facilities with Big House being that exception to allow for that dockside fueling. During the Planning Commission workshop, there were quite a few questions that came up, and we were able to work with the applicant to answer those. I'm going to kind of go through those rather quickly. So one of the questions was like, well, how big is this dry stack storage facility? What are you anticipating? And again, they have not designed it because that costs tens of thousands of dollars to do, and they're not going to do that until they have the approval to do it. So the question comes up, well, what is it going to look like? We don't know yet. So we're just using speculation of square footages at this time. So approximately 35,000 square feet for the building and additional space for the forklift to be able to maneuver. The precise number is unknown, but approximately 180 to 250. The height of the building would not exceed 50 feet, and that would be allowed for them to stack up to four boats.
Do you know what the height of the current dry stack is? Because it's only 3 high.
I do not know. I can ask the applicant if you want to hold that question for them when they present.
But isn't that a requirement of our town that it can't be above a certain height no
Yes.
matter?
Yeah,
So
the
it's
max.
a height max.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think for perspective for
Yeah.
other people to understand the difference in
Yeah.
scale.
Right.
Same on square footage.
I'm sorry?
The same on square footage of the current dry stack.
Okay.
Yeah. So height of what's currently there, square footage of what's currently there, and I think that's good for us to have when we get to that point of discussing dry dock. Thank you, Amanda. Anything else now? He took a break and he's writing on.
I'd also like a question about what's the fuel storage capacity at the current dry stack?
What's the fuel storage capacity at Wilson Village? Good.
Okay. So the question is, how does dry stack storage equate in square footage and development rights? So with Palmetto Bluff, it's designed through acreage. So they would be based on total acreage as opposed to a total square footage. So that total acreage is how much land does it take them to develop the entire site. And then for the mixed-use village area and islands in and around Anson, Marina, it's anticipated to develop as the current Phase 2 master plan, and I'll show that in a second. So this is the current Phase 2 master plan for Palmetto Bluff. And I'm going to have a bigger image here in just a second for you. So kind of what's anticipated for that total area of Phase 2. You're looking at, it's over almost 900 dwelling units and 80 acres of commercial development. Now, hopefully this can kind of explain a little bit better where you can see, and I'll start on this side. So this is Long Island here. They're allowed up to 32 residential dwelling units, 0 commercial. Island Compound, which is off of Big House, would allow for 3 residential units, 0 commercial. And then further inland, the mainland inland would allow for the 436 dwelling units, as well as 30 acres of commercial. As we move over to the side here, you have Big House Island, and that's where the actual marina would be located. up to 296, and then 20 acres of commercial. Doughboy Island, which is the light green here, would allow for up to 7 residential dwelling units, 0 commercial. And then the mainland portion here would allow for 125 dwelling units and 30 acres of commercial development. It should be known that for all of these waterfront areas, that they're still subject. We have a river protection overlay district. So what that means is that it's minimum setbacks that any type of development would be allowed to occur, which, as we read here, says along the water line, by increasing the minimum development setback and buffers from the OCRM critical line for the May, Cooper, and New Rivers from 50 feet to an average of 100 feet with each initial master plan, and a minimum of 80 feet on any lot. In commercial areas, the setback and buffers from the OCRM critical line shall be 150 feet. So what are the parking requirements? So in addition to the necessary parking for upland uses surrounding the marina, the necessary parking ratio for individual slips and ancillary uses will be considered at time of development plan. What that means is that we would work with the applicant during that development plan or the construction document phase to determine the necessary number of parking spaces that they would need. And just so you are aware, all of our development plans from a preliminary development plan do go in front of the Planning Commission, and Planning Commission has the authority to approve with conditions, or to deny those applications. So, it's from a checks and balances standpoint, it does go in front of our Planning Commission, and they take serious consideration as they're reviewing these plans. So, what's currently allowed? What can Palmetto Bluff do right now? So they're approved to construct the marina, which that first phase of the 50 slips and up to the 170. They can construct the uplands portion of the marina, which includes parking, commercial buildings, residential units, stormwater structures, upland fueling, and then the necessary infrastructure. And then with the Army Corps and DHEC approval, they could construct up to the 400 wet slips like we talked about in that second amendment. Do the spaces within the proposed dry stack storage count against that maximum 400 slips? I think we talked about this just a minute ago. They do not count against that. And then what's not allowed? Well, dry stack storage and dockside fueling, which is why we're here today. So Planning Commission at their November 1st meeting, they recommended to deny both the development agreement amendment as well as the concept plan amendment, that it was inconsistent with the original development agreement and the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. This was then forwarded to Town Council at their November 9th meeting, and that was voted to forward this request to the negotiating committee, which is why we're here today. During the Town Council meeting, there were various topics, issues that Town Council came up with. Some of the concerns were the number and size of slips in the boats that they could accommodate. Obviously, different sized boats need different sized slips. So some of them may be 24, some of them may be 60 feet. So that was one of the concerns that they had. The anticipated additional watercraft traffic from the marina and those anticipated destinations. The size, capacity, design of the dry stack storage. The current conditions, monitoring efforts surrounding ecology. They asked that they conduct a community meeting to present the proposal, receive feedback from the owners, residents, citizens, interested parties. And then they also said that potentially preserving additional property from development, such as Long Island, and/or development of larger compound-sized lots, such as those at the headwaters. So your actions that you have this morning is you can forward your recommendation to Planning Commission to approve the applications as submitted, as what they are requesting. You could recommend to approve the applications with amendments that are negotiated upon, or you could recommend denying the applications and then just forwarding that to Town Council. Process. As you can see, we've taken this through the Development Review Committee. Planning Commission workshop, Planning Commission public hearing, the Town Council's first reading, which is, it is still open. And then what would be necessary is, after today, potentially having a second negotiating committee meeting. That date is to be determined. And then depending on the outcome from that meeting, if it is necessary, any proposed changes or conditions would then go to Planning Commission, back to Planning Commission for them to rehear the request and provide that recommendation back to Town Council for a first and second reading. Again, Planning Commission meeting would be a public hearing as well as the second reading for Town Council.
Do y'all have, yes, questions of Kevin on his presentation? And if you have other questions during the next presentation, Kevin can be here. Kevin, thank you. You were very direct. You were representing what the town over decades has approved, right, wrong, or indifferent. I think you gave a really good presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions? Everyone good? Okay, so we will move on to the presentation by the applicant. As I said earlier, we most definitely will have a follow-up. I got a few emails saying we did this quick. I can assure you we don't do anything quick. We are as transparent as we can be. The agenda item was on the calendar as soon as we had the commitment of this committee, and it had been on our agenda calendar for well over 3 weeks, but we notify per the terms of our state and our municipal association, so you will not see an actual agenda until 3 days before a meeting, right, Terry? Which we have always abided by. So I hope y'all understand that. Keep an eye on our agenda center, and you can see when all meetings meet. You just won't see an agenda until we have everything set and presentations put together, just like the county. So you can actually open up that agenda and see what's going to happen. So please be aware of that for a future meeting. Mike, if you've just for the
Hi.
public
Yes.
and record, just say who you are, please.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Mike Hughes with Thomas Mountain Engineering. I've been working on Palmetto Bluff now for 20 years. So since 2002, I've had the great pleasure of seeing this project evolve from what was basically a hunting camp all the way through to what it is now, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work on the project moving forward. So really, we're looking at the next stage of development, and we're here really, as you said, to discuss dockside fueling and dry stack. And if I can see if I've got some exhibits. So this is one of the exhibits I did present previously. And just in summary, we are looking for another way to provide service to access water. Within Bluffton, there are limited access points within the county, even within the area, but also specifically within Bluffton, to get access to residents to the water. I mean, that is part of the culture, that is part of what we're trying to accomplish. And this really does provide us a great opportunity to get out on the water. The dry stack component really is a means, even at the time of the original development agreement, I think there's been a trend more towards dry stack and towards protecting the boats from the environment. So we are trying to find the opportunity to provide different ways to provide boat service. There was a comment real quickly I wanted to address about slip sizes, right? So the permit we have currently, there's a question about the dimension of slips. And right now, I believe the permit has, if I'm reading this correctly, we have 25-foot slips, 35-foot slips, 40-foot slips, 50s, and 55s. And so we have 8 25s, 12 35s, 49 40s, 14 50s, and then 6 55s. And then side ties for dedicated slips, we have a total of 89, and it does go through the linear footage of what those side tie slips are. It's 3,000 feet at 82 total slips. So it is specifically defined within the permit, and I'm assuming ratio-wise, depending on market conditions, we would be looking for similar distributions on those.
A
Yes.
question on that, and it's just for the good of the committee
Sure.
as well. Can an entity dictate if you have a 55-foot slip? Is that a maximum of a 55-foot boat, or would this applicant allow a a 100-foot boat, you know, going down that. Is there a way to restrict that?
So for side tie, I don't think there's necessarily a way to restrict it. I think usually you have power feeds and you have, depending on the size of the boat, you had dedicated pedestals to be able to serve those facilities. But in terms of could you stack and could you assemble smaller boats along that, I don't think there's any restriction on that.
Not so much the smaller boats, and maybe it's a Terry Finger question later. Can we require no more than a certain length of boat? But,
Negotiating committee. You can-
okay, I just wanted to make sure
you
that
can
was something on the
entertain
table.
Any type of ideas.
Okay.
So the concern would be more too large a vessel. Okay, I gotcha. In terms of other things to present, one of the exhibits I do have up here, it really was to identify originally the location that we are relative to the state-regulated shellfish harvesting areas. And really, all it wanted to show is the proximity of existing marinas and where we're located in terms of fueling, in terms of proximity to sensitive waters, we really are pushed well away from those locations. And we specifically pushed the density, and it was in the Second Development Agreement, Second Amendment to the Development Agreement, that we limited what we were doing on the May River and pushed things towards the southern portion of the property, really to get away to what were the more sensitive waters. Not that all waters shouldn't be protected, right, and be taken care of, but the most sensitive we were concerned with in terms of still providing water access, but being sensitive to the most critical areas was to push density down to the south side. And again, this is just to put things into perspective in terms of scale, where we're located, where it is relative to some of the places people are aware of. I think I also had on this one, I think I have maybe another exhibit in here. Oh, you see the dashed line in terms of it's 9.3 miles just to get out to the closest state shellfish harvesting area, right? Which is S003, and there's a dashed line that goes from there all the way down. So in terms of proximity, we are sensitive to these things, and we did look at them, and we do appreciate the importance of protecting the environment, and we do believe that there's a way to do it in a sensitive manner, while still providing service and access and recreation for residents to be able to get onto the water. And again, these are just some other diagrams just to show proximity and really the routing as to some of the places you would get. I know there was a concern at one point about Raccoon Creek, which was said to be a sensitive estuary. And really, if you can look at the water diagram, or I guess the navigable waters diagram, it is a long way to actually get navigable waters and even the flow of pollutants to get to that estuary. You would have to go around the point, up through close to where you would connect to Cooper River, back down to get to Raccoon Creek. So even proximity-wise from where we're located and the flow of water, it is a fair distance to get back to that sensitive estuary. So I know that was a concern. From a diagram standpoint, I wanted to make sure you can see relatively where we are to that waterway. And so I don't know if everyone kind of knows where Raccoon Creek is. It's just on the other side of Long Island. So in terms of traveled way, it'd be pretty distant.
Could you go back to that and point out Long Island for me?
Use your pointer if you can off the thing. I know we don't have that.
Oh, I do have okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Use your mouse, yeah.
Yeah, your mouse, thank you.
There we go, the little. So the marina goes right in here, and then Raccoon Creek back over here. So right now, and I think something we were talking about is there is a causeway that also acts as a dam for water passing in this direction. There's also a causeway that's here. There is a small pipe that does pass through here. So water right now through a small barrel pipe, could get back up to Raccoon Creek. But the massing of water would have to go all the way around this way. So in terms of protecting that area, I think what's in place today is actually helpful in protecting that location. Any questions?
The only question I do have is, make sure this presentation gets to us so we can put it on something. I didn't see it with our packet.
And I apologize. These are the same slides that we had as part of the presentation to council. And this diagram, all we wanted to represent was also the added protections that we have put in place. We do care about water quality, and we have always considered these important to the development of Palmetto Bluff. And so the yellow areas are protected managed forest or areas where we've got the River Road Preserve. We have a 150-foot residential RPOD buffer up in the headwaters area because we extended that because of the sensitivity of those waters. The orange area does represent the minimum 80-foot RPOD residential buffer, with the average for the property being 100. And then we also have a 150-foot commercial buffer that applies. So again, we are sensitive to runoff, we're sensitive to water quality protection. These are not things we take lightly, and it is a part of the culture of the property. And these are also just protected lands within Palmetto Bluff. Part of them are protected wetlands through wetland covenants, and part of them are managed forest. And again, we've got the River Road Preserve there and the headwaters lots, which have conservation easement on them. And this is just another diagram that we showed of some of the other marina sites within the area, just to give you kind of a perspective of where we are relative to other areas. And we did try to identify some of the sizes of what's being offered at those, or sizes of slips.
Keep that up just a second.
Yes.
Hey, John. Are y'all good with that? Ready for him to go? Give him a couple more minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Question.
Yes.
What's the proximity to the nearest marina from where you're located?
So if you were to go to Freeport, I believe it's 12 miles by boat. Freeport intermittently offers fueling. So the next is really Harbor Town, and I feel like it was from maybe it's another, I mean, it might be 15 miles total, plus or minus. So.
Thank you.
Y'all good with that? Okay.
I'll go back and confirm that.
Yeah,
for the
it's a
next.
good
Just-
slide.
I
I'd
had
like
it at
to.
one point, and so we'll add the total distance to full fueling, and that's diesel. There is diesel and there's gasoline at Harbor Town. So if your Freeport is intermittent gas, no diesel. So. And so this was just a diagram we prepared previously just to show. Again, we don't have a plan at this point, but we did overlay the permit drawings for the marina, and you can see the 171, I think 171, depending on how you count it, slips, where that's located, and then where the red line is located, that's the approximate location of where we would have the fuel tank on ground. You would have a double lined, there are regulations in place that DHEC regulates as it relates to fuel. There's anti-siphoning requirements. There are a lot of protections in place to make sure if something does happen, there's a detector that signifies that there's a leak in the first line that would then be collected or picked up by the second line. But that's where the fuel tanks would be. The line would run out along the gangway or along the fixed pier, down the gangway to the floating in kind of the box. Let me see if I'll use my cursor here instead of my finger. So there's a gangway that runs along here, and this is really the first phase that's being developed. This would be the fuel tank locations. The line would run along to the fixed pier head, down the gangway, and down to the bottom, which is where the floating dock would be and the pump itself would be, and the distribution.
Mike, is it proposed that it be self-serve, or is it going?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt so quickly, but absolutely not.
Right.
No, we would not be doing self-serve. This would be entirely served by folks that are working and operating the facility.
Mike, what's the elevation of the land there? Do you know?
So the elevation of land is somewhere around 10. It goes up to 12, and the edge of the critical line is closer to 6. But again, that's a rough diagram, but that's the intention. It's closer to I guess, the intercoastal waterway versus pushing it to the other end of the area. And it is proposed to just be one location.
I have a question.
Sure.
What do the boaters do now for gas when they need to get refuel?
So at Wilson, it is entirely done landside, right? So they'll pick the boats up and they will transport the boat to the rack, and they'll fuel the boat up on the rack on landside, outside the critical line, out of water. The problem we have is with wet slips, the boats are larger and they're not able to be picked up with a forklift. So as of right now, there is no way for anyone, so if you had someone staying at the inn, or you have the Grace or something else that doesn't have the ability to get fueling up at Wilson, they do have to go to Harbor Town, or they do have to go to the Marina to fuel. So if it's not small enough to be picked up by the forklift, fueling occurs in another area within the county. And that's what we were thinking about dry stack, is over on that end of the property. That's just basically 2 Wilson landings just stacked next to each other, because that's about the approximate size. We know the 70, another question was how many slips are there, or how many dry stacks are there right now at Wilson, and it's 78 total spaces, but it's 77 because of fire protection nook that you can't really put a boat there. So.
I had a question.
Yes.
Fuel storage at Wilson is what now?
The total size of the tank, I have to look that up. I do not know.
What do you anticipate if you had the dockside fueling?
For this, I think they were looking at 5,000 gallon tanks. And I think there'd be and we were just looking at what the industry standard was, because we really don't know what we're going to need, but 5,000 diesel, 5,000 for gasoline.
So this would answer Amanda's question. Your conceptual for dry stack would be identical to Wilson times 1 or 2 or 3.
So we use this as to understand if we were to do planning in terms of sizing, right? I don't know architecturally, I'm sure they'd want to do something a little different, maybe a different color, not signal red, or, but to get a concept of how they would have it function, we do know that 70, for a marina to function, we've seen this at Wilson, to be able to hold our own, we're a little shy of where we need to be to actually function adequately. It's a lot of, I mean, between labor and everything else, 78 is on the low side of where you can really be a functioning marina. But for a size perspective, this is the reason we picked this, was to try to understand what it looks like in terms of scale of Big House Island, what it looks like in scale of what our slips are right now. So that's kind of a diagram. Now, in terms of height, I know Wilson right now, in terms of height, we are somewhere around 44 feet, right? So the cap is 50.
I'm just kidding. I like getting acknowledgement from Heather. So the cap is 50.
Yes. So we're a little, because I know at one point there was such demand at Wilson, we looked at if there was the possibility to raise it and actually add another 4th rack. So at some point we did investigate that. I think we just kind of dismissed it, but that was something to look at, because the demand is very high, and that was an easier way to provide opportunity to get people on the water.
Are they only for Palmetto Bluff residents now?
So right now they are, because I think originally it was open to anyone, but priority was always given, I think even in the contract, that first priority would have to go to residents first. But as long as there was availability at the time of Wilson, if there was availability, first choice went to Palmetto Bluff residents, and then it was open to anyone. So there was a period of time where you did not have to live there, but that quickly, once we got enough people at the property, 78
Would
was
you
the range.
get to Heather, if you don't know this answer, what the wait list is now on Wilson? wait list?
Question.
Yes.
How far is it from the fuel dock to the last slip?
So from this location, where the fueling would be, to the last slip? Great question, and we can. Oh, yes. So from the standpoint of fueling, you would only fuel at this location. There would be a single location where you would pull your boat up to fuel. There would not be any sort of additional lines running to every slip. It would be, you would move to this single location, fuel up, go on your way, or fuel up and then go back to the boat slip.
Mike, well,
One follow-up question.
Sure.
Got a lot of questioning about whether there would be any dredging required to do this development.
So as of right now, we have bathymetric surveys that show we have the depth and we have the width to be able to navigate through the channel. At some point, there may be requirements for markers, maybe not requirements, but desire for markers to make sure you navigate the channel properly, because it appears, even if you look here, it appears very wide, and the actual channel is not very wide. There's a big sandbar that goes through here, and even as you get to the confluence at the next connection of the river, it's a little counter to, if you're boating, it's a little counter to what you normally think, because you usually think the outside with the faster velocities is where the channel is, and the inside is where the sediment builds up. But we've got a couple places where it doesn't hold true. But we just recently did a bathymetric survey approximately a year ago to make sure, because we know the river does move a fair amount with the amount of current that goes through here.
That's outside of, but just for education purposes, where does that happen? You know, say you never came to us, and y'all have every right to do what you're showing us right now.
Yep.
Before you start in the sandbar, we go out every year to see where the sandbars change. I count on Larry to tell me where they are every year. Where do you go to get that approval to dredge? And could they give it? I mean, you don't know if they would give it to you, right?
I do not, and I believe it's the Coast Guard that
Coast Guard
actually
gives you
approves that.
the approval to dredge. Okay,
Not 100%, but I think that is the governing authority.
Might be good to find out if
Yes,
you don't mind.
I think that's another, yeah.
I thought it was Corps of Engineers.
I think it's Corps Engineers,
Yeah.
but
Fred, have you finished?
Yes, I'm not sure if I got an answer. So
sure.
Are you saying that you're not sure whether you have to do dredging or you don't have to do dredging?
Right now, we don't have to do dredging. The way
Don't
the
have to.
channel is established right now, we don't have to do any dredging.
Yeah, Mike, what is the maximum size boat you can lift and fuel in the dry docks?
I would have to figure that out. I know right now, what is the biggest boat we have? I think it's 40 and less. I don't think we have anything higher than 40 that can get on that forklift.
Ashley, what was your question? I'm sorry.
What was the maximum size boat they can lift to fuel?
Oh, okay, maximum size boat they could lift, 45, you think?
And then the other challenge, I believe, is, and I don't know about sailboats, but I think there's also an issue if you wanted to have a sailboat that, the powering of a sailboat, you still have challenges with forklifts on getting those out of the water. And navigable waters, I believe, are the Coast Guard, right? Because, and then I think dredging, I think you're right, you also have to get approval from our Corps of Engineers to do the physical dredging.
I have a question.
Yes, and please speak into the mic, Amanda.
And this goes back to my first question about the elevation of the land, because I'm not familiar with fuel storage and piping, and I don't know anything about it. So what does that do to the land if it's only at 10 feet? Like, how are these tanks in the ground, or depth? And
So I think the plan would be to bury the tanks. Is the concern in terms of could fueling get out of it?
yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, like, if they're in the ground and the ground's already at 10, like, how far down, and is there a possibility that something would come up and out? Yeah.
So typically tanks are stored, or when they're buried underground, they'll have a dead man on them, which is basically a strap that goes over the tank, and it has either weights or augers that hold the tank down to make sure there's not a buoyancy issue, and also make sure you don't have any possibility of something coming up. In terms of the actual control, if there is a hurricane or if there's something where you did get a tidal surge, I'll have to figure that one out if there's an issue. I'm sure there's a protection in place that causes some sort of check valve to ensure that nothing can actually get out. I know a lot of times the venting, because you have to have venting on them, it extends well above the ground so that air can actually pass well above the ground elevation.
I guess the same would be for the pipe to get it to the dock. Like, what does that look like?
So
as
the
far
pipe
as-
to get to the dock is buried, but it is a double-walled pipe, so it would
Because
just
now
run
that's going
underground.
lower.
Yep. So, and it basically goes underground about 3 feet. It gets to the dock itself, and at that point, it's run on the stringer of the dock, runs down the gangway.
You wouldn't physically see it until you got to the edge.
You wouldn't see it
Wouldn't
at
see it
all.
at all, okay.
No, because it'll navigate, you actually have like kind of conduit sections on the dock itself that would pass under the dock, so you would never see the piping.
Mike,
Yes.
based on what we're seeing here in front of us, so approximately how many dry storage and how many wet storage are we looking at?
So what you're seeing there is approximately 171, right, in terms of wet slips, and then what you're seeing is double Wilson.
Which is
with-
roughly about 150.
Yes, it's 150, except the only difference, I think this would be probably a little more than 150, because if you remember, Wilson actually allows you to pass through the middle of the center unit to run the forklift up and drop in, and we don't have any need for back access, so that would also be enclosed. So you could get more than just the 77 with the same footprint, and if you went up to the 4 stacks versus the 1. Now, T-tops is another thing. You can't always get 4 high if you're doing T-tops, which is the most popular boat style right now. You'd have to go with a series of flats boats. So again, you adjust the racks based on what the demand
Right.
is. But
Right, I understand.
those are my slides. I think I will yield the floor.
Thank you, Mike. So our next item is any follow-up questions to
Well,
Mike?
So if
Oh, you have more applicant presentation. Oh, okay, sorry. I didn't know there was more of a,
I apologize. I was trying to do the technical side of things.
oh,
and
okay, I
then-
didn't know. I'm sorry.
And
I'm
then
sorry.
be softer.
Great. Will, for the group and for the record, please state your name and your title and,
My name is Will Culp, and I'm a partner with South Street Partners. First, Happy New Year. Can't believe it's already 2022. I'm happy to be back in front of the council to discuss this request. Councilman Hamilton, you asked a question back in, I believe it was November, about what our residents and property owners, which are also your residents, thought about our plan. And my answer to you was that we had presented in town hall format that we were applying for a development amendment to have fuel over water and dry stack. As it relates to presenting that plan, as we've stated today and previously, we haven't designed it yet. So to be able to show, here's what it looks like, here's how many, et cetera, we haven't been able to do that. But what we did do to try to accommodate the request, not only for yourself, but in the council, but for us, as opposed to holding a community-wide meeting with the potential for 1,100 property owners to attend who don't all live here full-time with the holidays, we thought the best way to get answers for how our community felt about this potential addition of fuel over water and dry stack was to survey them, to send out a survey. Interestingly, we send out a lot of surveys throughout our properties to our property owners. Out of the 1,100 approximately we sent, we had 500 responses within the first 18 hours and ended up with about just shy of 800 responses out of 1,100, which is an incredible response rate. Out of the, I've got the numbers, and we'll make sure you guys get a copy of this, these results, but out of the 765 respondents, 485 of them stated they were boaters, okay? So about 65%. Of those, the question was, do you believe fuel over water is beneficial? Of the 765 respondents, 475 said yes, which is about 63% of the total respondents. But if you think about of the 485 who said they were boaters, those are most likely the ones who think fuel is beneficial. If you don't boat, you probably don't know, or you maybe don't, you might not care. But of the 485 that said they were boaters, I don't have the exact details, but I can get it. 474 people said yes to fuel over water being beneficial as it relates to their quality of life, their access to water at the Anson Marina. In addition to that, we did ask questions about dry stack. Would you be interested in leasing? Would you be interested in buying? As we mentioned before, we have roughly 180 on the wait list just at Wilson. And if you think about, we're at 1,100 approximately units, property owners at Palmetto Bluff out of potentially 4,000, right? And today with 1,100, we have a 180-person wait list for dry stack, plus another 244 of the existing 1,100 that say they are interested in leasing, and 160 that say they are interested in owning a dry stack unit. And so from our perspective, this is, while there are some that don't want it or don't prefer it, this was a overwhelming majority for us saying what this plan and what we've proposed is what our community members want, not what South Street wants or Palmetto Bluff wants, but in addition to that, what our community members and property owners want. So I'll make sure you have a copy and everyone gets a copy of this, but I wanted to at least address that aspect of it. Any questions for me on that?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
When you speak of voters that did the survey, it's interesting that you ask who are voters. Sometimes that sounds political, but how many of those that did the survey admit that they were voters and that they wanted to dry stack?
That they were voters and they did not
They wanted to dry stack.
That's what I'm going to get you that answer. We've got to sift through the data of each individual response to siphon that out. I'm not making the statement that 100% of those who are voters wanted fuel. I've got to get I've got to do that math from the 765 responses.
Okay, one other question.
Sure.
Yes, sir, I did request or suggested clearly that I think you should have a community meeting. I heard your explanation of why you thought it probably wasn't going to be the best thing to do at the time. But I still believe before I can make a fair decision on anything, I would like to have the community involved at least to say or ask questions. Mm-hmm. Some of the questions we were asking at this panel are just drop in the bucket compared to someone who actually lives and breathes that community.
Sure.
So even if they don't agree, I think it's beneficial that you say, I'm going to answer your questions anyway.
And fully respect and understand that. And that is how we do operate and manage our investment, our property. And we're present, we're here, we're around the community. I spent New Year's Eve here for 4 days and met many of our property owners and answered questions, right, that they had about anything, right, whether it be dry stack fuel or, what's happening at the club. And so between myself and Jordan Phillips, who's one of my partners, is here, and the other two South Street partners, in addition to our entire team, we're present. And so we hold town hall meetings, we send out communication, we answer every email, every phone call that comes back to us. We have an open door policy. And so as it relates to responding to our property owners, whether it's positive or negative, we do that. and we make an effort to do that. We want, I think we said this when we first arrived back in, June, and I maybe mentioned it last time we were here. We spent the first 4 months, and quite frankly, we'll spend the next 10 years listening to our property owners, our community. We aren't a group that says, here's what we're going to do. We had so many questions. What are your plans? What are you going to do? Our answers were, we don't know. We want to hear from you. We want to understand from our community members and property owners what they want. And then we go execute a plan based on that and our expertise and understanding of the land and our values and goals.
Can I, and maybe a follow-up on this, Will, and I guess it's a blessing and a curse. I've been in this place so long, but I go back to the beginnings of Palmetto Bluff, and I go back to Mayor McCracken is here, and I interviewed him and talking about how he felt it important to put it on a referendum, on the ballot for Bluffton residents at the time. And I was one of them, fortunately, to be one of the 700 that lived here to decide what we want to do with Palmetto Bluff. And I so appreciate Mayor McCracken's thought to get that out to people who will most likely never live there, but have lived here and are watching things grow up around us. So saying that, I've seen Jay Page, I've seen Garrett Albert, even David O'Donohue in Dallas. It's hard to meet people. It's hard. I mean, I answered 150 emails over the last 3 days, and if anyone missed an email from me, I apologize, but it was just too many. Because I think it is important to communicate, and I did get responses, thank you. I don't think they expected any of us to ever answer, but we are not the council, we are not elected officials that you perceive others to be. We are feet on the ground, boots on the ground, love our residents. They did meet. When the Montage was built, Garrett Albert, and I don't know who in this room lived here when he was there, he had really hard meetings with the public. It's not a survey, it's not an email, it's so easy to do that, and I think it's needed, but I think Mayor Pro Tem's pretty direct request was, you've got to get face-to-face, and we have had charrettes at the time when we've had 15,000 people live in this town, and we did the growth framework map. We did in-person workshops. You can't get them all in a room at the same time, but it is that, and believe me, they're residents that aren't here in this room today that keep us all updated and really are more objective to things. You know, there are people, damn, don't do anything else. I want to be the last one that moved here, and I'm sorry, that ain't going to happen. And then there's some that are following and trust their elected officials, and then there are just those in the middle that really have a passion for whatever it is. So I think that has to happen before we go back and forth. I really do. If it takes a month or two, I really think these residents deserve it because they moved into here far before y'all knew Palmetto Bluff existed for the most of them. So I wanted to kind of support Fred in that. And I think it's good for you to do that. I love surveys. I think they're great as a secondary form because it does get you had an amazing response. Y'all should do our community survey. You have more than what we're getting. And I would love to see it. I've been forwarded what I have, little bits of it, but I think this committee would like it.
Mayor?
Yes.
If I may, while we're on that subject too, have you all spoken with the Conservancy, with Jay Whaley, and where are they on this? I guess I would like to hear from them and understand where they are. I mean, that was their purpose of being organized and formed, was to weigh in on items of conservation and how the development of Palmetto Bluff proceeds. So I would be extremely interested in understanding that from the Conservancy standpoint.
I'll answer your first question. I think it's a really good one. We have a great relationship with the Conservancy. I was with Jay last week. I talk to Jay once a week. I'm meeting with Patty Kennedy next week, the chair of the board. I think just a sidebar, we think the Conservancy is, we think it's one of the most, if not the most special aspects of Palmetto Bluff. We are a less is more group, right? It's what we think. If you can look to our previous developments and our existing ones. our concept, our motto is design with nature, develop with nature, right? And be respectful of it. So we have a great relationship with them. As it relates to Jay, with Jay, we have invited Jay into every single one of our, and this wasn't occurring previously, but we've invited Jay to every single one of our planning and development meetings from the very beginning to when we're ready to execute a plan. As it relates, I can't speak for Jay. I can't say Jay supports this, but I haven't heard Jay or the Conservancy say, we don't support it.
Maybe we should hear from them to understand where they are on that. That, I think, is important.
If that's a request of this committee, get that arranged and have them maybe do a smaller version of a presentation of what their purpose and their mission were. So I wrote that down with Jay. We're kind of morphing into a D and E. So any questions of the applicant? Any more questions of Kevin? Are there any comments and questions within the committee that you want to throw kind of out there that we will need to address?
I still would like to know what the current storage at the Wilson Marina is of fuel.
Okay.
And are they above ground or I'm assuming they're probably below ground from what he said earlier. And then he said 5,000 gallon tanks, two, one gasoline and one diesel. Is that correct? I know that's just proposed. I know that's nothing, in writing.
The Wilson tank's above ground.
They are above ground?
Wilson one's above.
Okay, thank you.
And to clarify through that, the fuel that is allowed at Wilson can be done at Big House. The request is, can they bring it over water?
Exactly, and that's and that's one thing that I have a strong background in, and I'm very interested in it.
Please, I wrote that down. So current fuel storage, as it sits currently at Wilson.
Right, and then the proposed.
And proposed.
Right.
Okay.
And I have one last
know
question
staff's
too.
taking these notes, but I'm doing
Thank
it
you.
too, just to make
Can
sure.
you repeat how many 50-foot slips and 55-foot slips have been approved?
The copy of the permit in the
It is.
in the packet. Okay, so I think this is in the packet, but I'll read it. Sorry.
Down 8 25s,
Yeah.
12 35s, 49 40s, 14 50s, and 6
6
55s.
Thank you.
That's
Perfect.
Is that total? I didn't add it quick enough. But is that the first 50, the first phase, or is that the total 170 number? Oh, if it's over 50, it's got to be the total.
Right.
Yeah, I was total.
99, almost 100.
What do you give?
It is deep within this development agreement, Ashley, but
Yeah,
and it actually showed somewhat of a.
Yes, except for the side tie slips. Yep, which equates to 89 plus or minus. And the side ties are dedicated right now to be 42 in phase 1, 19, and so yep.
Okay.
Mike, I got a question. Do you see this as a phase one, or is this a final phase, or have you even thought about that? I mean, would you be coming back at some later date and asking for an extension or more dry stacks or, more wet slips that
So
would
beyond
fall within the?
170 we have now, or you're saying yes?
Yes.
Yes. The 170 is what we felt comfortable. Now, again, the original permit was a 5-year permit, right? So we felt comfortable in a 5-year permit. We build the first 50, and we continue along with the remainder of that. But yes.
During
we
that
did
5-year period.
We did see the opportunity to go beyond to closer to the 300 or 400 wet slips.
Okay. Any other questions of anyone that's presented?
Sorry, one last question going along with those lines.
Just speak into the mic.
Sorry. Would you have any willingness, and I guess this is where we come in as a negotiations committee, and on bringing that wet slip number down in exchange for a dry slip, or for the dry dock? Sorry. That's, I'm putting that out there for you all. You don't have to answer.
No,
today.
and you don't have to answer, because I do want to support Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Hamilton in the November request to meet in person. And I think before we get a significant meeting of people that live here, at least in person, we can throw out our thoughts of where we negotiate, because in your packet, you saw some real strong concerns of council, and I'll mention them, but I do think we need to have that in-person meeting before we sit here as a body to negotiate, really on behalf of residents who live in Palmetto Bluff, and for those that have grown up on this water that see changes on a daily basis. But y'all saw in the packet the concerns of council. The meeting was the primary one. Long Island and Doughboy was very important on the environment, which has changed over the past 15, 20 years, as we all know. Wet versus dry, Ashley, like you mentioned. And I want to just remind everyone, the request is for dry stack and fuel over water. What Mike gave us is something for all of us to be aware of that can be done today. And if we wouldn't have sent this to a negotiating committee, it can be done today. So everything's on the table, as Terry said. Size of boat that can go down that waterway, on dry and wet, and we can negotiate. And we have sat here before, and it went nowhere, and we haven't, as you saw in the minutes from 19, hadn't heard back from that applicant. So it can go nowhere, but this is a place, not a project. And I hope everyone stops using the word project, because since the day this was brought to Bluffton, Mayor McCracken, it was always considered a place. And it's a very important partnership in place for this town, because it does give a lot of people access to the water that never, ever had a chance. And when you have access, you have appreciation. So please throw it all out, but I do feel like, in respect of council and Mayor Pro Tem, that needs to happen first, unless y'all have something else different. Okay. Do you want to go into public comment, and then we can have final? And then I know we do have other engagements, and I don't want anyone to have to leave. So any other questions of staff, of the applicant, of Mike, of Terry? Okay. Well, we are going to move to public comment. I keep it very, very strict, as you do at Planning Commission. I like how you cut it off. It is 3 minutes max, and I will politely thank you when the buzzer goes off. I do not want to hear any signs of disrespect toward anyone in this room. We all have our thoughts, our feelings, our passions, but if it becomes disrespectful, I will gavel you. And I just want to, is that clear enough? Thank you. But do share your thoughts, because we are listening. There are probably a dozen emails I received last night from residents and people that live in Bluffton. I tried to forward everything to y'all. I will put it all in one concise, I just couldn't do it last night. So you'll have one packet, because I do believe we don't do that at a formal council meeting, but I think it's important for everyone to be heard. There are some really great solutions, which I like to hear when there are issues, and I'll make sure this committee gets it. So if you're here and I call your name, please come up, your name, your address, and you have 3 minutes. Robert Fuoco, and if I mispronounce your name, please let me know, because I don't mean to. Is Robert Fuoco, is that correct? It is. Good. Thank you. And if you feel comfortable to talk without your mask, you can, but if you want to leave it on, that's fine too.
Much easier to talk without this. So I'd already submitted written comments.
Name and address.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Robert Fuoco, spelled F-U-O-C-O, address 18 Jackfield Road, Bluffton. I'm in Palmetto Bluff, live there. I still am a land use attorney. I practice somewhat part-time in Maryland, so I'm very familiar with this whole application process. And generally, I represent developers, so I'm sort of on the other side of this. From our standpoint, as an attorney, when I represent a developer, one of the things you look at when you're presenting a change is you have to present it to the community, right? This has never been presented to us as a proposal, as a concept plan, to say, this is what we want to do. What are your thoughts? How is this going to affect your quality of life? What are your inputs? What changes would you like to make? There's been no negotiation. There's been no discussion with the developers. And I understand the need to maximize revenue, which is what the developer wants to do. Again, that's what I do as a living. but there has to be a partnership. And I think PB is different than a lot of other communities, is the way this project was brought in. The concessions made by the developer when it was annexed into the town of Bluffton. I don't think you can go back on certain things that were promised and were given up in order to get to this point. You know, I think the concept of bringing PB into Bluffton was unique at the time. And to go back now and try to take back things that were conceded and take back things that the developer voluntarily gave up to get to this point is something that this negotiating committee and eventually the town council needs to look at seriously. Because when you're trading, you can't take back something that you gave up in order to get something else. Because all you're doing is just continuing to ignore the rules and move down the path of we want more, we want more, we want more. There has to be some discussion, right? There has to be some look at the environmental issues. And I'm not an environmental expert. I rely on them when I present a case. So having Jay Whaley give his input, I think is a great idea. I think Jay's a great steward of the community. I think the opinion of the Conservancy should be listened to. But the opinion of not just the PB residents, but everyone else. I mean, how will this affect the town? How will it affect other people on the water? You know, how wide is the water in that area for boats? I don't know that. But I'm asking that the committee have open-minded ideas and ways to look at this and not just, and I'm not saying rubber stamp, but not just approve it because it's being requested by a new developer. Right? Thank you.
Sir. Ansley Manuel? Ansley Manuel, 104 Pritchard Street. I want to thank the applicant and the staff for a very clear presentation today, and you all have been asking some great questions. I want to remind this committee that Palmetto Bluff originally wanted to leave the county and coming to the town, be annexed into the town, to have some sources say triple the density that the county was going to allow them to have. And in concession for that much higher density, they were willing to trade having access to the water, limiting that. And, you know, when you go back to the original agreement and even the Second Amendment, it clearly states no fuel over water. So that's always been important. And Palmetto Bluff traded that to have the higher density. I'm glad you all brought up the dredging. Not clear about whether they're going to want to dredge in the future. Also, the only hard number we have on these boat slips is the permit that has now expired, but that's the only hard number we have. So are you going to negotiate from 400? Or are you going to go negotiate from what the state agency has allowed them to have? Thank you. James Lawton, and I don't think he's here, but I forwarded y'all his email from last night. But I'll call him just in case he came. James Lawton. I don't see him. Jesse White. Jesse White. Good morning.
Good morning, Jesse White on behalf of the Coastal Conservation League, Beaufort, South Carolina. Dockside fueling and a new dry stack at the southern end of Palmetto Bluff pose substantial and unnecessary risks to water quality, ecosystem health, and community quality of life. We urge you to deny these requested changes because they're incompatible with the original vision for Palmetto Bluff. The original agreement contained important commitments to protect water quality and retain open space, explicitly prohibiting dockside fueling and limiting to a single dry stack. These were protections negotiated, and lifting them now will have a domino effect on the intensity of water use and development on the southern end of Palmetto Bluff and beyond, including the ecologically important and vulnerable islands of Doughboy and Long Island. The risks and long-term costs of lifting these restrictions will be borne by the town and its residents, and they far outweigh any perceived short-term gains. While a marina has long been part of the plans, dockside fueling and a new dry stack were never part of those plans. They are not authorized under the existing permit, and they would require new state and federal permits to be applied for. In addition, there already exist at least 5 deep-water marinas with dockside fueling on Hilton Head. The changes requested are a clear departure from the original vision and core values that define Palmetto Bluff as a high-quality, environmentally sensitive community. If allowed, they'll represent the beginning of a shift in how the property develops and what it looks and feels like. The pristine and unique New River estuary will be irreparably converted into highly trafficked and intensely developed fueling station. At a minimum, the town should hold firm on the original commitment to prohibit dockside fueling. It should also renegotiate to substantially reduce the number of allowable wet slips. Increased boat traffic, particularly larger vessels, will impair and erode the vast surrounding marsh and inevitably lead to requests for dredging of the New River. An additional dry stack should only be considered in exchange for substantial reduction in wet slips. Even 50 wet slips would be significant at this location on the New River, which is winding and full of sand flats. We would further recommend a commitment to permanent protection for the most ecologically valuable and vulnerable parts of Palmetto Bluff through conservation easements, including Long Island and Doughboy Islands. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, ma'am. Jack Daly?
I'll start. I would ask the guy that does the slides if you could go back to the first slide that was presented.
Well, you have, yeah, he can, but 3 minutes. You're really just giving public comment. It's no questions or
Okay,
answers.
Jack Daly. I own a lot of islands and marsh adjacent to Palmetto Bluff, and I'm very worried about what they're proposing. If you would see that slide, you would see this 3-mile stretch of river that is restricted to shellfish harvesting. There's a 1-mile stretch in the middle, right where they want that marina, that's prohibited for shellfish harvesting. Now, he showed you a map of public shellfish harvesting. There's a lot of private shellfish harvesting. All around my islands, all in the marsh I have, fishing is public, crabbing is public, shrimping is public. There's problems in that river. Fuel over water, pump outs, bilge pumps. I saw a golf course, round up on all those nice lawns. That's going to find its way into the water. And crabs and shrimp just won't stay in one place. They move. So you can't say the shrimp are only in Raccoon Creek. They're going to be up the New River. They're going to be all over into the ocean and back, okay? So I would beg you to stay with the original agreement and not allow fuel over water and the extra dry stacks. Even more dry stack is just more boat traffic, more waves, more damage to the marsh. And it's silly to say that a boat over 40 feet needs fuel every 8 miles. Those boats have several hundred gallons of fuel capacity. They can easily make it to Savannah, Charleston, and further on the fuel they have on board. They don't need to fuel up every 8 miles. That's silly. The smaller boats can be lifted easily. We saw 35 feet or small. They can easily be lifted onto land. So please, I would beg you to stay with the original plan. And I had another note. And I would like to see a community meeting instead of just a shareholder meeting. If I were a realtor in development and I said, I could add to your property value if I do this, do you agree? Probably most people would say yes. But that's not the community. Those are people that are in business with you. So what else are they going to say? So please, stick with the original agreement. It's a good one. There's a lot of wildlife out there, and we won't even start talking about all the birds that forage on the islands I have and forage in those marshes. What will happen to them when fuel spills, because it will, and the damage to the marsh and the damage to the river that's already been done. Years ago, that was a very fertile shellfish beds in that area. There was a change in the river. All the Defusky oysters died off. They're trying to come back. Some parts still aren't there, like right in front of them. Let's not make it worse. And as an adjacent neighbor, I'm happy to object in front of the state or the Corps of Engineer and provide someone standing if they wish to object to this in court. So please, stick with your original agreement that was good. There's no need to gamble. There's no need to do anything risky just because of some money.
Can you give me your address? You didn't do that at the beginning.
I live on Hilton Head. My property in Bluffton is along the
an address. We just need
4 Myrtle Lane. Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Leslie Kinhart? I can't quite. Is it Kinhart? Linhart, the letter is wrong. Leslie Linhart. Good afternoon.
Yes, Mayor, members of the committee, my name is Leslie Linhart. I'm with the South Carolina Environmental Law Project in Mount Pleasant at 510 Live Oak Drive in Mount Pleasant. And the Environmental Law Project, we call ourselves SCELP, has represented the local Sierra Club chapter for over the years with regard to Palmetto Bluff in seeking water quality and wetland protections for the area on behalf of the members of the Sierra Club and all of the members of the public who use these waters. And we are here to ask that the committee recommend denial of the amendment. First of all, just as a clarification on the dredging issue, it's the Corps of Engineers and DHEC's Ocean and Coastal Resource Management Office that approves dredging activities, not the Coast Guard. And I think that that's just one example of some confusion that is going on with this project, and that, reiterates what the mayor suggested and what Mr. Hamilton has suggested, that we really need the community to have more access and more information for this. But regardless of that, we believe this request is completely contrary to the comprehensive plan. As you are well aware, a development agreement and authorized development must be consistent with the local government's comprehensive plan and land development regulations. And the plan states that Bluffton should place planning and land use decisions, including stormwater treatment, on the potential impacts to its watershed. The New River Estuary and the May River, in particular, is designated by DHEC as an outstanding resource water, or ORW. Preserving May River's water quality is and should be a very high priority for the town. Dockside fueling and a new dry stack are significant changes and would allow uses that the original development agreement sought to preclude, specifically protection of water quality in the May River. Dockside fueling facilities generate pollutants that can easily flow into the river and sink into the Marina basin, where they can be ingested by bottom or filter feeding fish and negatively impact aquatic vegetation. Even small spills, such as overfilling gas tanks, which occur very commonly, can have very detrimental effects and have a down trickle effect on the entire watershed. So for these reasons, we would ask that the town council that the committee recommend that the Fifth Amendment to the Development Agreement Amendment be denied. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Eric Sutherland.
Morning, my name is Eric Sutherland, 155 Stallings Island Street, Palmetto Bluff. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the leadership team of volunteers of the Palmetto Bluff Neighborhood Association. We are an independent organization of over 250 members, which is growing daily, of Palmetto Bluff homeowners community that was relaunched in October of 21. We are not an affiliate of South Street Partners. A key objective of the Neighborhood Association is to serve our members in assisting to ensure the original vision of Palmetto Bluff remains in place as it grows. And this requires careful and informed planning and decision-making. Homeowners by far have the largest investment in Palmetto Bluff. We know and respect your desire to have constructive public input, not by just residents of Palmetto Bluff, but also the Bluffton community at large. This is why we are here today, because we believe that you have not received the level of community input that you have requested, and we feel is essential for you to arrive at the best outcome for the community as well as for the environment. We believe the decisions before you have profound and long-lasting impact on the future of Palmetto Bluff and the town of Bluffton. Open, honest, public discussions is the foundation of our democracy, as well as for good decision-making. The Palmetto Bluff Neighborhood Association is not here to take sides, but we want to make sure that a full, open, honest process takes place as you consider the amendments before you. First, please know, as you have heard, the developers not shared their plans or their vision about Anson Marina with the Palmetto Bluff community at large or its neighbors. The general level of knowledge of Anson, Big House, Long Island, Doughboy are little, as well as how little conservation there truly exists in Palmetto Bluff. Secondly, Contrary to South Street Partners' comments on November 9 council meeting, there has been no town hall to present plans to Palmetto Bluff property owners. At that meeting, they committed to the council to make clear that the meeting was necessary, that was a necessary step before meeting with the negotiating committee. They have not fulfilled their commitment to you. Their survey, which they reference, was not independent. They only asked in the survey, what do you want? That's it, nothing else. Another thing you should be aware is that gratefully, Fred Hamilton and Larry Toomer have graciously agreed to meet with the Palmetto Bluff Neighborhood Association on Thursday, January 13th at Palmetto Bluff. We would invite you and encourage you to visit and be with us as well to answer those questions.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you. Peter Kahn, is it Kahn or Cohn? K-O-H-N? Not mistaken, he may have sent an email. I will double check and I'll send comments to the committee. Bob Moret, did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you.
Thank you. Bob Moret, 253 Waterfowl Road in Palmetto Bluff in Bluffton. I'm a member of the leadership group of the Neighborhood Association, but I just wanted to share as a private citizen some of the excerpts from a foundational document, which we have not talked about today at all, and that is the community charter for Palmetto Bluff. This is page 1 of what we all get as property owners. And the mayor has actually quoted this charter.
I might need a copy of that.
You can have my copy here. The vision for Palmetto Bluff, guiding principles is to preserve and protect one of America's treasured landscapes while creating a human settlement for those who cherish the unique environment. The intrinsic value of Palmetto Bluff lies in the beauty, vastness, and richness of its sea island landscape. The plan for Palmetto Bluff has and will continue to be guided by the land rather than by imposition of a developer template on this land. It is our desire to create a place rather than a project. A memorable phrase. A primary goal and vision will be the shared dedication to the natural treasures which have made Palmetto Bluff so special for so long. This community charter is intended to serve as a framework for community governance reflective of the priority given to the preservation of Palmetto Bluff's rich history, abundant wildlife, natural beauty, and critical fresh and saltwater environment. We love this. It's going to be on our website because we think it's an important document. Do I give it to you?
Feel free to, you can give it to our town manager and we'll get it copied for this committee and council. Thank you, sir. Patricia Cole. Jane Hester is not here. She sent an email. I forwarded it to the committee. Lisa Daniel. I did not see an email from her, but we will reach out. Lisa Daniel. And finally, Lynn Casey. You sent us one of the first emails. Good morning.
Lynn Ann Casey, 790 Old Moreland Road. Thank you to the council and the negotiating committee today. I've lived in and around Bluffton part-time for more than 20 years, both as a resident in Palmetto Bluff, but also in the surrounding community. So I've been here long before 278 was here, and Palmetto Bluff is my long-term home. And this is a very important and personal decision for the negotiating committee and for the town council. This is a tipping point for Palmetto Bluff. It is so important that we have a great relationship with the town, with the residents of Bluffton, with South Street Partners and Henderson Park, their backers and financiers. It is very important that we have the communication. We don't just need one town council, one town hall meeting to share communication with them. We need that to be an ongoing communication between the owners of Palmetto Bluff and South Street Partners. The reason for that is this is not the only change that they're going to ask for in the future. Things are going to change, the climate is changing, situations will change. We need an ongoing great relationship between all of us. And this is a great negotiating committee to hear the public and to hear what we really think about the potential dredging, these changes. As a resident, I ask that you consider rejecting this request. It will hurt the environment. It will hurt the community of Palmetto Bluff. It will overdevelop the area called Anson Marina, and encourage South Street Partners to actually meet with the members. Zoom meetings are possible. You can schedule them within a week notice. If they got so much response from the survey, which was very short and very narrowly defined, they're going to get great response in communications with when they actually do outreach. I have not had a chance to meet the two partners here today, but I'm going to try to do that after this meeting because I have not had the opportunity to attend any town hall meetings with South Street Partners. So thank you all for considering my request as a resident to deny the motions before you and recommend that to the town council. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. As promised, I wasn't going to have this run past 12. So we are going to end, unless staff had any thoughts of any questions. Do y'all have our request that we can get? Did anyone take notes? Kevin, would you like to finally address?
Yes, ma'am. I believe all of us have been over here taking notes, various questions that you guys have been coming up with. And then we'll work on putting all that together, and then work with the applicant as well. I guess, one of the biggest items was that community meeting that's been discussed, and that needs to happen prior to the next negotiating committee meeting.
Right.
From a procedural standpoint, that's up to you, how you want to move forward. To set the next meeting. If you just want to let us know and we can.
Well, and I'll say it again, it will be on our agenda center on our website as a placeholder as soon as Kim can find out from you and the applicant when that step's been taken. And I think it's very important of all of us to be here, and it is near impossible to get 5 people together. So, add this when we're all working. That's why we try to do it quickly. So the meeting could be placed a month ahead of time. The agenda will not go out no sooner than, or no later than 3 days before the meeting. So that is just, staff has so much more to do, and it's getting everything together. So when that resident can click on the agenda center and see the agenda, they actually can see the packet. So please, please know that. I think that's all. The other thing I do want to make everyone aware of, on our January agenda, we always have our development agreement updates. We have done it pretty consistently. Maybe we've missed a year, maybe last year, but Palmetto Bluff is the last development agreement that has people that actually sign. It's the longest development agreement we have and the largest. So they are required at the terms of our development agreement to give us an update. The update has nothing to do with this, nothing. There's going to be no action taken, but it is going to be on the January agenda. And it's usually what's been going on, how many homes have been built, what's the A-tax revenue, what's going on now. We get to meet the new partners. So that will be on January's agenda, but please do not get this out on Nextdoor, Link, whatever those things are people get on. We're not making a decision from today. This may not be, there may not be a decision made. Who knows? But that is truly just an update. We have had a really big outbreak of this virus. Stephen is watching it. We are right now at 50% capacity. We have not been consistent, and I know I had some comments at our last council meeting. It's consistent amongst all committees and commissions now. If it goes up, guys, we've got to be careful because we've got to watch out for our residents. So kind of keep an eye on that on our website too regarding attendance. We don't expect it, but he is really monitoring it. So, and it's his town hall, so he gets to, I get to set the agenda and Stephen runs things. So if y'all are okay to push this out until the meeting, is there anyone against that? Any other questions or thoughts you may have at this moment? Carol, we really love having you here. Love your questions you've asked. And Amanda, thank you for taking your chair as well. Yes, sir.
We got a lot of emails from you guys, and Mayor said she answered 150, and if I can tell you, I may answer one or two. The only reason I answered those one or two because I know they didn't go out to everyone else. It was come directly to me. But she speaks clearly our thoughts. So when she responds, I use that as ditto. Okay, thank you.
And I think council all can respond individually. And if I notice one responding, I mean, it's no sense you getting the same, what are we going to do? Oh, yes, I agree too. And I agree too. That's just clogging up emails. So, got up to speak. I can't remember. Anyway, with that, we will end this at item really F, or G, and date to be determined. We'll let staff work with the applicant on the meetings. I'm sure we will all hear. And at the end of the day, I do agree with I want to say your name right, Mr. Moret. I have to read what I wrote, but I still stand by it. I do. We all believe Palmetto Bluff is a place. It is a place that we feel welcomed, that we can go and enjoy and really get a feel of the beauty of the environment and the not just wealth in terms of money, but the wealth of love that so many of y'all bring to this town makes the growth of this town worthwhile. So I will say that and ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
No, we are adjourned.
The County Channel is also available on video on demand. Go to BeaufortCountySC.gov, scroll down to Public Meetings, click Watch Now, and then click the Video on Demand button and select your program from the list.
Call the meeting to order.
If you'd like a DVD of this program, click on the link on the right and fill out the order form. And thank you for watching the County Channel.
Beaufort County strongly encourages local, small, and minority-owned businesses to submit a new vendor application to its purchasing department. The application and vendor guide are available online, along with information about current business opportunities. Visit www.beaufortcountysc.gov. Click on I Want To. View bids and RFPs under Business Services. Vendors must be registered with the county in order to respond to solicitations. Quotes, bids, or proposals submitted by businesses that are not registered with the county will be rejected. Registered vendors receive email notifications when new solicitations pertaining to their area of interest are posted to the website. Thanks for watching the County Channel.